today has been an unusual day because often, when you're teaching a class, you kind of get all the plan worked out and everything, and you're praying about that. But then, as things develop and you get closer to it, the Spirit kind of comes in and says, "No, we need to go a different direction." And all week, I had kind of an idea of what I was going to do today, and in the last 36 hours, the Spirit came in and kept sending me things that said, "No, you need to do it differently." And so that's what we're doing. And that has gone on even during David's sermon, where some of these things have hit me. Let me, if I can get a hold of this quickly enough, just to give you an illustration of what David was talking about. Psalm 1 really gives us that indication, and it's just an awesome one. I think there's a reason it's number 1. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. And listen to this, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. But here, listen to the last verse. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. That goes back to what David was saying. God's going to give us and equip us as we're trying to be missional in our work with people around us in the world. And I'll couple that and review with something I mentioned several weeks ago from the Barna Group in their studies. And that is that people who are unchurched usually have preconceived ideas about what Christians are like. Many of them not positive. And they view Christians as wanting to come in and convert them, which obviously, that's what we're looking at here, is we've all experienced that at one point in life or another. But they don't want to be sold something. They want to be listened to. And we talked about early on that that's what Jesus did. He would go. And how many times did he confront someone who was asking him for something and wanting to be healed or something like that? And he said, "What do you want me to do for you?" He put it on them and was listening to what they were looking for. To kind of bring us back to where we were last week and to continue on that, let me share with you another passage that's driving a lot of what we're doing here. Leadership would like for this campus to be a community center and known, and that means known throughout our community as a place where we're serving the needs of people around us in San Antonio and beyond, and especially in this community. And so a lot of these things that we've talked about, and I almost forgot, let me pass these out and get someone to help with that. Pass them. Make sure everybody got one. And start with page 2, which should be on the top. This is the list that we developed last week, that we wrote on the board on page 2, of all of the different things that we came up with in class that could be done to put on an event, which was selected primarily because it was one of the simplest ones of all of those on the priorities that we had come up, or on the list we had come up with earlier. All the different categories, because the Bexar County Sheriff's Department, basically we're hosting an event, and that is a training class that the Sheriff's Department would put on. They would send the instructors and bring the material, and they would advertise it. So those were two things that we didn't have to figure out how to do. But it ties in with trying to make Northside into a known community center in the area around us. And that's where I want to share a passage with you from 1 Corinthians 9:19 through 23. Paul talks about this and gives us some very clear guidance. Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share its blessings. So he gives us the guidance that and when we look at the way the apostles went, for instance, they would do things to get attention. Look what Peter did on the day of Pentecost. He went, they had healed someone and got a lot of attention, and that obviously wasn't accidental. Jesus, when he was really wanting to get attention, went into the temple in Jerusalem and started preaching. And so there are going to be times when we need to do those same kind of things, and that's what a lot of these events are geared for. We're serving the needs of some organization in our community by offering this as a venue. But as we discussed, we also want to always provide people to host that event and to greet people when they come in, and a little table or something, some material, to talk about what's Northside. What are we all about? What do we believe in? What are we here to do? How do we serve people? And that's going to be a message that we get the opportunity to share with people. And so Tina had emailed me. We've been talking back and forth for, just to tell you how the Spirit works. My best friend and former business partner, a guy named Mike Sellers, lives in Vancouver, Washington, about 2,200 miles from here. Fascinatingly, I just met a couple that are visiting today for the first time from that very area. They'd even been to the church where Mike is an elder. He told me about 3 months ago, he mentioned, we were talking, and he mentioned that one of the things I told him about, I was going to start teaching this class back in May. He said, well, one thing we're doing is we did an adopt a elementary school program there at Vancouver Church. And he's telling me about that. And I thought, well, we'll put that on the list. You know, that sounds like a great ministry that we could get involved in. 2 days later, Tina emailed me that her daughter had told her about when she was in Abilene, working with a school there, where there's a church up in Abilene that was doing an adopt a school program. I thought, okay, I've got this slice out of the blue, you know, so there's more to it. Well, then Tina has sent me more information, and I'm sitting here trying to finalize the class at the end of this week. And Tina emails me again. Well, so the school started. What are you thinking about this? Well, I had emailed back to her, folks. Well, it's way down our list. We've got a lot of other things we're going to talk about, and we've got to work through. We've got a couple more weeks to go. And it's the way the Spirit works, folks. And so that's, you know, we need to always be sensitive to that kind of guidance, because He comes in and tells us, yeah, where you're headed is not where you need to be going tomorrow. It's somewhere else. And so I'm sharing that kind of personal experience with you because it's helpful to always kind of have our antenna up and be aware of what the Spirit's guiding us to do. The thing about everything that we do in any kind of event, hosting, for instance, the meeting that Rebecca talked about, the Child Protective Services investigative caseworkers, where they have 41 of them that come in. And bear in mind, here's something important. She has told us that they are generally fairly young college graduates. And their turnover rate is very high, so they're thinking they're going to go out, and you can picture the mindset. They're going to go out and change the world, right? They're coming out with a degree in probably social sciences or something. I don't know what it would be, but it's social work of some sort. And they get what they view as maybe their dream job, working for Child Protective Services as an investigative caseworker. And then they get down into the grind of it, and it becomes a totally different thing. We're going to have an opportunity when we host one of those meetings for them to support them and to meet them and to get those contacts and to be able to say, hey, you know, we know your job is tough and we're praying for you, and a lot of other things that we can do that can have an immense impact. And those 41 people, you know, probably live in all kinds of different parts of San Antonio. And so that turns into a very solid ministry. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to paint you a little picture, speaking on that topic, that I work in the emergency room at the VA. And so 2 weeks ago, we had a female veteran come in, and not suicidal, homicidal, or anything like that, but very high anxiety, tearful. And she'd been working for Child Protective Services and investigations for about 8 months. And so this is a veteran, and of course, I'm not going to give you any specific details that are names or anything, but she was just very tearful. She was very compassionate, wanted to do the job, but she'd been traumatized. She had some combat trauma and some childhood trauma, and these traumas that she was experiencing going out and doing these investigations were just building onto her traumas and stuff. And she just couldn't do it anymore. And she was extremely tearful and upset about that, and needed a couple weeks off to really reevaluate her priorities and stuff. So, I mean, that's how it's impacted. She worked 11 days straight. She'd been on call over the weekend, got called out twice. So she has 60 cases on her caseload, which really the average should be around 20-ish, okay? And so just that's what they're experiencing. So just when we say that they're really stressed or whatever, it's just not what you really realize it is. It's really, and Larry and I both worked Child Protective Services for many years, and we experienced firsthand the stress and stuff. And I specialized in adoptions. At the end of my career, first it was abuse and neglect investigations and stuff. So, you know, they're underpaid and overworked, and the turnover will continue to be great until we value our children a little more and their safety. And so that's one of the things that we need to do is advocate for them to have a living wage, really. They don't. I could have almost qualified for child welfare, you know, working for Child Protective Services for 2 children at one time when I was a single parent. So, you know, it goes beyond just giving them a place. To me, that certainly is good and supportive, okay? But continue to pray for them every day, and for God to strengthen them, because I could not have made it without God. There is no way I could do my job or ever have done my job. And I can see God's hand in the work that I did almost daily, you know, and sometimes it just like hit you in the face. And there was one instance, I'll tell one quick story, okay. One instance where I had 2 little boys who was on my caseload in Odessa, Texas. And they were with a wonderful family, but that family came in and said, we're being transferred. And she said, we would love to adopt the boys, but if we can't, you know, please check with their aunt and uncle again and see if they would be willing to take it, because they'd stay connected. They just lived down in South Texas, and but had visited and stuff, and they wanted this family to have the boys if they could. So it ended up that I was sitting in church praying in Augusta, Texas that morning for these 2 boys, and then the aunt and uncle were sitting down in Corpus Christi, I think, praying, you know, too, and she said something came over her. She called me Monday morning, and she said something came over me that I needed to call you, and that if that family can take the boys, that's wonderful, but if they can't, we will, you know, and offer the parents that they can visit them once a year, and we would send pictures And so that was from Friday when they said they couldn't take the boys to Monday. The aunts called me and said, we will take them if they cannot. And they didn't know that the foster parents had been transferred. And that family ended up adopting 3 children, so there were 3 children. So that was meant to be for them. And these boys were meant to be with an aunt and uncle who were members of the Church of Christ in Boys. So you see what I mean? You've got to, I just don't know how a caseworker can make it better, and without prayer. I have no idea. But, I just feel so sorry for the ones that try. But anyway, I'm gonna let you go. Sorry.
I think y'all are a fabulous resource for us because as we do that and work to grow our safe ministry, you have those voices of experience, and obviously you got past the first year or two of that very demanding and challenging and draining type of work and made it an entire career.
And that was,
what's intriguing about it is we worked in California. She worked in Texas. I worked in Arizona and in California. We both worked in California. California pays a whole lot more than Texas. California, and relative to the cost of living, still pays a whole lot more than Texas. And that makes it a whole lot easier.
Sure.
Just even providing resources, it makes it a whole lot easier because then you're not worrying about, okay, you're a single parent. Before we have to, I was a single parent for a while. But it's, you don't have to worry about the child care money, you don't have to worry about the extra money for school, and you don't have to worry about some of those things. What was fascinating to me is I was stressed because I was busy. I never had the stress problem, at least I've never admitted to it. Where I had the stress problems with management. Management gave me a heart attack. Confirmed by HR. Because management would expect more and more and more because as resources dried up, they expected more and more, and actually I got under more stress as a supervisor than I was as a worker. But
you're always overworked.
yeah, I'm overworked anywhere if you do a good job.
But you make 3 times the money that you do in Texas, because I tried to come.
Well, it takes away one of the stresses of, you don't have to worry about your personal financial situation while you're also worrying about the children you're trying to serve in your job. Thank you all so much for that input. It gives us, I think, a much better insight into how we go about dealing with the folks when we're coming in contact with the people at CPS. A lot of those same things can apply to teachers. And one of the things that, as I was taking the long way around to get to, is to talk about, and I had this, as I said, down on my list, which was talking about adopt a school program. And the Spirit moved it up to the top of the list for us to work on details of how we could begin that. There are 2 elementary schools that are very close to us, and Kim works at Rome Forest, is that correct? It's just over on Evans Road. And Jeannie has just recently retired as a teacher, and you taught elementary most of your career, didn't you, Jean? Kathy has just recently retired as a teacher and has taught a number of different grade levels. And so we've got resources in the room, and maybe others, I'm not sure, that know what the stresses are on the teachers. A lot of that has come from a lot of the changes in our culture in the last few years. Is it safe to say, y'all that have been doing it for a long time, that it's a lot harder now than it used to be 20 years ago? And so part of our, and Jeannie brought it up, and as I was talking to her before class, she said there's 2 parts to it. Well, I had kind of pictured and understood it to be that, and we've got more research to do on it, that we would look at an adopt a school program, start with an elementary school. There's 2 that are very close to us, and they're in our community, and that's the whole point of trying to do this with the nearest ones first. She said, well, it's dealing with kids or it's supporting the teachers. And I said, well, I kind of thought we would do both, but as we talked about it, it became clear that probably might be more easier for us to get started in a building program. And second, more effective, we could be more effective with supporting the teachers and the stresses and the things that they deal with every day than trying to also deal with the kids, because there are a lot more limitations legally and based on school policy and things like that, and just normal practical things when it comes to doing things and supporting the children. And so let's talk about some of the things that we can do there. If you look at, let me back up for just a moment. I told you to look at page 2 of that list. And I want to show you one of the benefits of what we're doing here and how this is working so well. Look at the list and see if you can tell me any of these items that do not apply to a number of other things that we would be doing, events that we would host, that are only specific to the event we talked about last week. If you see one, raise your hand.
Maybe posters and signage.
Pardon me?
Maybe making posters and signage, you might not really do that.
Well, but actually, that's what we're talking about is directional signage and stuff inside the building, so that when people come in, maybe in the parking lot and stuff like that.
Like I like we're saying,
Without the
without
school,
the
maybe at
school,
the
you
school.
would need that, right?
Oh,
We would be here.
no, I was talking about another event where we would host an event here. This, basically, what I looked at in fact, that I didn't, I only got one hand raised, it was on the other thing. But when we're talking about hosting an event, all of these things that we came up with last week would need to be done. And I added on there number 7, number 5. Coordinate and work directly with whatever the organization is that's doing the event. In this case that we talked about last week, it was the sheriff's department. But when I started writing this down, I realized that's got to be done for any organization with CPS, for instance, that would come in, or any other group that we would host, use a host in this building, some sort of an event or a meeting for them. And so we've created, and we've started creating the roadmap for how do we do this. Now, obviously, the one we talked about last week, they would come in and teach it and bring all the material. So any other one we would do, very likely, would be something that we're putting on, and we had a list of several of those. We would need to also then expand this list and find what do we do to get the stop the bleed, the CPR, for instance. That is one that we're going to need to gather information for and training materials, maybe from the Red Cross and other companies, other organizations, and then have someone who's certified to teach the CPR portion and things like that. And so we've got more work that we're going to need to do, but this gives us a foundation. So everything that we do in coming up with the list of action steps for any of these things, almost all of them will have applications in the other things. And what we're going to be doing is building a set of steps that we can document and provide to everyone. So whenever we have someone else who volunteers, besides the folks in this room, we would be able to say, okay, here's what we're going to need to do. Is there something you can contribute off of this list? And so those are the kind of things that come to mind. Now turn your page over and let's start looking at the Adopt a School program and what kind of things would we need to do. And let's narrow the focus to get started. Let's think about adopting a school and going there to support the teachers in whatever way we can. And what kind of things would we be able to do and need to do? And I have 3 teachers in the room, so we'll be looking to y'all to throw out some suggestions to get us started at least.
Sadly, when I think of teachers, food is a great way to get teachers.
Absolutely, Starbucks kickers.
I have been told that sometimes the schedule is so intense that you don't even get time to stop and eat. So when you say food, can you expand on that a little bit?
I can tell you a church that actually met at the school that I was at before. I think I mentioned this before. Once a month, once in a while, we would go in and our
Teacher
break
break.
room, thank you.
Teacher's lounge.
And there would be snacks laid out. So it was just snacks, and there would be a sign there saying who it was from, and they were praying for us, and that kind of thing. So it was that simple. And other times they would provide lunch. Or breakfast, actually, there would be breakfast, tacos, and coffee sometimes, so.
One of the churches that had adopted a school I was last in, at the beginning of school, of course, this was COVID era, so things were a little different, but, they sent out a little Google form to all the teachers and said, if you would like for us to come pray for you and your classroom before school starts, just sign up and we'll come by. And you didn't have, they knew we were gonna be in meetings and not even gonna be able to be in our classrooms. But you signed up, and then we happened to be in the common area outside of our classrooms when they were doing this, and they went into each of our classrooms as us and signed up and prayed for us, the teacher, they prayed for our kids, for the school year. It was just a group of about 3 or 4 ladies. And I mean, that touched a lot of teachers. Teachers that don't go to church had signed up. And so it was really neat to see the reaction of the other teachers who had signed up and thought, because nobody's going to turn away prayer, regardless of whether you go to church or not. And that was really moving that they did that. And they got permission from the principal. The principal's the one, because even with teachers, there's a chain of command.
Right.
And the principal had forwarded the Google form out. And if you want this to happen, they're coming next day. Just put your name in your classroom, and they're going to come in and pray for.
So Kathy, tell us a little bit more about that. I'm not sure I followed. Did the group come in to the school, into the classroom?
Yes, they have permission. to
Even
do
if
that.
y'all weren't even in there at the time?
Yeah, none of us were in the classroom because we were all. It was during before school starts, when we're all in meetings for days on end, and we were in meetings, so there wasn't any way we could schedule every teacher to go in and pray with them. But they weren't going to go to your classroom unless you approved it. You just put your classroom number and your name, and they were going to go in at a certain time and pray for you and your class for the year. And they came up with the idea through COVID because, COVID hit us so hard. But anyway, it was very moving. That what really struck me was the reaction of the other teachers who weren't church, some who weren't churchgoers. And nearly everybody signed up. So, yeah, this is before school started, like right now, like the district I was in, they're in professional development right now. Their kids haven't started yet. And so, yeah, it was before the kids came in. They were praying for my kids, for the year, for the classroom. And they spent a considerable amount of time in each classroom praying. It was about 2 or 3 ladies. I want to say 3. Could have been more. And there were several groups, because they didn't, took all the different that came in. But it was really moving, very touching. But,
That's fascinating.
thought it was a really neat idea.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but you can't, you would still have to go through a chain of command.
Sure.
We had to approve it as a teacher, because there's still I'm sure there's some sort of legality issues out there, with that, but.
I saw on Facebook this weekend, a parent, she was a former music teacher at Rome Forest, but her kids go to Johnson Ranch now. And like Mel hasn't started yet, and so she sent out a Google form, she and somebody else, to, it went on Facebook, but I'm not sure what church they attend. But people met at Johnson Ranch, I think yesterday, to pray, do a prayer walk around the school. So they weren't going inside. That's a big issue this year, is going inside. So they walk around the school and pray. So you can do that anytime, on a weekend. I don't think it would be received well during the week.
No.
And then, don't you think a big part of this is you're gonna have to coordinate with,
You have to
The
coordinate with the
principal?
principal.
you can't just show up. You
No.
got to, there has to be lots of coordination here. I remember when we were doing Grace Bond, and we were going to local restaurants. One of the restaurants we went to, it was actually, I'm gonna tell you the name of it, because it surprised me. Because they have, in God We Trust on their windows, was, Whataburger. They refused to allow us in. So,
Yeah.
and again, because they thought of it in terms of maybe, I don't know what you guys, the manager's thought was, but, we can't assume people want us to do what we're talking about. We have to ask for permission, go through channels, those kind of things.
See, David, thank you. That's the kind of thing that we're also looking at here, is not just what we do, but then who's gonna do it and how are we gonna do it? We're gonna have to have somebody who's gonna coordinate with the school, with the principal, and, make sure that we're communicating the right thing and that. So, yes, Mary.
And I think, that person has to also pass the background.
My understanding is, yes, if you're gonna go into the school, I'm not sure about that, Kathy, is the.
Yeah, like
thing there. You're
nowadays,
not interacting with
if
the
you're
kids,
gonna
I'm
go
not
in
there
and-
yet.
if you're gonna go and have an interaction with kids, you gotta have background checks.
Yeah.
But if you're just gonna go in and serve lunch, I
Now
don't,
you still have to have that.
background checks, okay. Yeah,
In that areas, I found 3 websites, that actually literally said adopt a school program. One was Waco Independent District, another was Denton, Washington DC, but they all talk about, there are certain things that that you're gonna do. You have to have a background check, everybody has to have a background check. And they handle it different ways and things like that. So that's another coordination of.
but it's real easy to do, every school has got the link where you just go on and fill it out, it takes.
And they did it last year, and it took just a few days.
Yeah.
That arrest didn't show
So
up.
the one that we have,
But,
like, we've had background checks here, but
No,
to teach
you're
the
gonna have-
kids, they're not good for
no,
school.
you're gonna have to do it on their
Yeah.
actual, and probably if we're at 2 different schools, we may have to do 2 different ones.
See, my daughter Caitlin worked at Kamau, and so she was gonna come help me do something. But since she wasn't part of NEIC, she had not done a background check. She had to do another one. So, yeah, it's each district.
And I think it was either Waco or Denton, that question got asked on the FAQ page. And they said, yes, if you've got someone who's got a background check, from, because they're all both in pretty much the same place, for doing the checking. And, they said, yeah, they could bring us that and give us an authorization form to use that, and then we could use it. And so that's gonna vary. And I think Kim's probably right about, that it's gotta be done by the school district on their form and their process, for it to be, usable. Mary?
I think the other thing to do also is to see if there's already an adopt a school program at the school and couple along with them, because the school may already have one. I know for St. Philip's, because we have dual credit, if you're going to volunteer, there has to be a show of the vaccination. And if you have a CCW, you cannot carry around children.
Oh, yeah, no.
And so people attempted to because they didn't know the inside rules of the school.
So when we look at this, to get started, what kind of things are we gonna have to do? We've identified a couple here. We've gotta have somebody that's gonna coordinate. We're gonna need somebody to coordinate this part of it. How many people would it really take to be able to do this on an ongoing basis?
Is there an application that the organization that is going in has to fill out? If you're going in as a group, is there a adopt a school application that has to be filled out? And if there is there insurance that the organization has to have?
Alan, it seems to, I think, a good point of contact at whatever school would be a Catholic. I mean, that's kind of, That's what they do is support children, support
Or
they
nurse,
might not know, I mean, a need that we can't even think of, I don't know.
That's me.
The counselor or the nurse.
Maybe both, huh?
Yeah.
Al?
I've heard a lot mentioned about faculty support. Are there other organizations that are doing this now? I mean, not churches, but other organizations with whom it might be wise to coordinate? I don't know.
I suspect there are on both the Waco and Denton websites, the ISD websites, they never mention churches in their programs. I did a search on Adopt a School, and that's what came up. And they mentioned businesses and community organizations. And so then they talk about, employees. So they're really focusing it on businesses, local businesses that might support a school, and there are quite a few. And so I think that's the other thing that comes into play. It doesn't have to be for us to help understand how to work out the detail. If I hear what you're saying correctly, it's let's find out who else is doing it and what do they do, and that way it would give us a model to follow and to look at for ideas for what we would want to do.
Well, and there might be schools who are in communities where there's not a lot of business support, just because of the community, what the nature of it is. I grew up in a school district in high school that had 6 high schools in it. And most of the taxes paid in that area were done by industries. There was industrial parks in our district that footed a lot of the bills and extra bills for things that happened at the schools. But some communities don't have that. They just have a little, CBD boutique on the corner, whatever it may be. It may not be, of course, there's a lot of money in that, but nonetheless, I'm just saying, not all districts are equal when it comes to having support available to them. Not all schools are
And of course, for us,
to be here.
is it fair to say we would maybe also want to early on talk to any ISD admin and see if they've got suggestions that could give us a list of organizations that are already doing that and that kind of thing, or is it really more, and I'm asking the 3 teachers now, or is it really better if we talk to the school director?
Probably school specific, I think.
And I think the thing that is key here, and Jeannie and other teachers will probably attest to this, is yes, there's all these organizations that beginning of the school, the builder in our local area would provide us lunch. And then maybe later on, a month later, some restaurant out in the area would provide us breakfast. So those things go on all the time.
Okay.
But there's no consistency, and in a lot of cases, to truly adopt a school, you're saying that we're gonna be here all the time, maybe once a month we're gonna do it. And there's all kinds of things you can do for teachers that could directly impact the kids too. So I think that to do that is being more consistent and more intentional than just the other businesses, like Jeannie even mentioned that like HEB adopted their school one time, or just gave was a big part of this. Yeah, and so you have that going on all the time, but the consistent, we're here all the time, we're gonna provide this all the time, and we're gonna do these extra things, that is pretty well non-existent.
That's exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about, because we want to be a consistent presence in that school. Somebody mentioned last night when we were talking about this, that whenever they have trunk or treat, they always, Mike mentioned it about what they do in Vancouver. Whenever they have do trunk or treat in the fall, which we do here, they let the school know, and they send a notice out to all the other schools, and they get a bunch of folks that are the teachers and the parents that come and bring their kids to the church's trunk or treat event. And that's one of the things we started doing last year with our advertising for trunk or treat, and it was very effective. It's the first time we've ever done that. And so that was one more way where we springboard off of something one of the other ministries is doing here in Northside, and expand on that. Mary, wait, you were first.
So one of my questions was, and I'm sure I missed it earlier, are we talking about while kids are on campus campus? I know we're talking about supporting staff, is this block on campus?
It's going to, over time, I think it would get to that point. I think that's what we're gonna try and determine is, what's gonna be most effective for us. I can picture this as something that we start small and we gradually expand it, and we're able to do more. And we're kind of feeling our way on it now. I'm doing research to try and find out how this works with other people and what they're doing. And as some have already suggested, check with other organizations and see what they do. But that's would hopefully be what we would be able to do, yes.
Because you got three teachers here, I think we want to pick their brain as much as possible, about day-to-day operations at schools.
And one more thing was,
But it has changed with the Uvalde situation, we're not gonna know that.
every school that I've worked at, I've never had any kind of business do anything like this, so, I'm not saying that it's not being done, because clearly it is, something's being done, I just say that to say, I bet it's not difficult at all to find a school that doesn't have anybody's support.
Okay. Thank you. Al?
I only know this through the teachers that I'm related to. Well, I've got two in my family, and some friends who have a daughter that's a teacher in Hazard. And I know that there are some financial challenges for teachers in supplying and getting needed supplies for their rooms, for the kids, papers, pencil sharp. I've seen it all on the list. And my daughter, and my daughter-in-law both were teachers. They both were teachers. Now we're working in a different capacity. But I don't know but that's talking about gift cards and money and whatever we're doing. The reason it comes up for me is this one young lady I knew, her parents in Hazard, her classroom was wiped out. It was flooded, completely flooded. So I've just picked up some things from some retired teachers here, and I'm sitting in tour this week. So because they're not even started school yet, because they were supposed to start last week, and of course that's not happening. And of course she had 20 years worth of supplies in that classroom, and so it's all because the water was up in the sea.
Now, how many people have heard of GoFundMe?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I see stuff I saw something on Nextdoor. How many are familiar with Nextdoor, the Nextdoor app? Most everybody, neighborhood app. Lady posted that she was doing something for kids as they go back to school to provide backpacks and stuff for them. I don't remember where she was taking it. She said she put an extra box up on top of her mailbox that people could put stuff in and started getting all of these donations for these supplies and things like that for the kids from people that were on Nextdoor. And then she put her address on it. They would come by and leave it on her front porch and drop it off. This is one woman taking this on. But I think what I was thinking, Al, that you made me think of is we could promote that kind of thing to the community and say, we're the central point for providing for this school for, teacher supplies. These are the things, here's the list.
Well, the teachers know what they are.
And the community could very well get involved in doing that. Come join us in helping the teachers at your school, or the school in your neighborhood. I mean, there's ways to do that and to do it properly that would then elicit the kind of responses that we're talking about. Let me go here, Mayor, because you've already contributed at least a couple of times.
One of the things, and this is probably a seasonal thing, but I don't know why, my teachers have created the website. Teachers are moving classrooms, they have to take stuff down every year, and then they have to move it all back. And a lot of them don't have enough time to get their classroom trained. So that might be something like twice a year, like toward the end of the year, maybe you work at the school and everyone has a background check and a lot of stuff in place. You could get a sign-up sheet and have classroom helpers, people who have time or things up and I'm working. And so I go help Sarah move stuff after hours. If we've got kids too, so that I have to watch them. So if people have the free time, you could organize a list of people that can go in and help teachers pack up their classrooms, move stuff into storage or carry stuff. We could have used help. Glen Oaks has an office in the front. My wife's all the way back to the campus, and they had boxes, and you have to go through the doors all the way down the hallways, all the way to the very last building, and through the building, and all the way down the hall in the back. And we could have just used some people to help us carry boxes and
Yeah, they
shelves.
don't have 2 custodians per school.
Oh, yeah.
And they had to cut custodians when they were budget cutting, that's when they cut custodians. So teachers were having to clean their own chalkboards, trays, and dusty,
There's tons of stuff that setting up the classroom at the beginning of the year, and if y'all had there was a sign up list and more bodies are willing to help, that second set of hands, I think would be.
You know?
This is another seasonal thing. Like, I know at our school, we have quite a few homeless kids and eco-dis kids that, they don't have money, the parents. And at Christmas time, there's a Catholic church that, adopts a family.
So we're not doing this just because we want a pet spiritual project. We're doing this in the name of Jesus because we love people as an end in itself. So if we start a deal like this, we have to continue. You cannot stop. If you do, that's the kiss of death. So I'm just talking about intentionality and being aware of that.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
I want to build on that seasonal Christmas thing. Every teacher knows the kids in their class who are, we'll say needy for lack of a better word. And that's an ongoing thing. I do not know in Texas what the deal is with breakfast in schools, if it even exists. Okay. But they know the kids that are hungry. They know the kids that have worn the same pants 6 days in a row. It's not because they don't know how to do one. It's because that's the only pair of pants they have. The teachers know that. The teachers can handle that discreetly. You know, hey Johnny, here's I got some extra stuff here. Take it home. You know, I need you to take this home for me. You're helping me out. And nobody knows other than Johnny and the teacher and his family. You know, I've got an extra pair of pants that I think will fit you. You know, I think you look brilliant. That's, if you want to help kids, that's probably the avenue to do it. It doesn't involve background checks. It involves, I doubt that they are going to deal with used clothes, not with COVID and everything else. You can't give away used clothes anymore other than Salvation Army, because they wash them. But that's a contact point, because if teachers have comfortable kids and not hungry kids, and kids that feel good in what they're wearing, they're going to be easier to maintain.
Right.
At least I think so. You know, I always, you know, kids don't pay attention if there's stomach trouble.
I think, and I appreciate your input and David, your comment, because what we're looking at here is how do we start, and it's going to have to be relatively small in doing something, and the words consistency came out a few minutes ago. It's going to have to be consistent, and we're going to have to be committed to it, and that's the other word that David has added to this. And so that gets down to having someone who is going to be willing to be committed to being the person that makes this, that keeps this working on a long-term basis, and then having a team of people that will do that. Yeah.
Along those lines, I personally say was 90% of people at church are sprinters and 90% of the programs are marathons. When you're designing something like that, design it at a small scale,
Right.
so that 1 or 2 key people could keep it running. Expand it as you have opportunity to, but if you promise too much or you have too many parallel resources that need to be aware of the fact that it's a spiritual maturity thing. It's easy to get enthusiastic for a few weeks, but it's really hard to keep doing that year after year.
And that's going to be the key, Adam, thank you, because I think the most important thing is what David said. If we start and then stop, it's kiss of death. We've done more damage to Northside than we've done benefit. Yeah, I know.
You know, can we taking in a couple of bags of chocolate nuggets, Hershey's nuggets, and like a bag or two of cuties to go in the teacher's lounge. Can't we just go ahead and do that? Just take them into the office, say, here, we're church prize, you're one of our schools in our district, and we just wanted to have this for the teachers. Just to get your foot in the door, to do something right now.
That's the kind of thing that probably we need to focus on in the beginning.
Yeah, but in the school, they're praised in the office especially, and the teachers too.
Say it again.
Snacks in the teacher's lounge.
Like cutie backwards, or like cutie.
Oranges and chocolates, okay? And also food, because of COVID, they need to be, anything we do for lunch probably needs to be like Subway, Sinbad. You just take picture trays, but anymore they need to be individually wrapped, So things that could be, they're wrapped.
Okay, usually when we have class, the teacher talks too long, and this time it's your fault.
Just for a long-term thing, maybe it's just like something this before, is there may be a Jersey on the same thing that are already doing something like this, and then we could plug in, because I feel like this is kind of, it's localized, it's like, we're looking at regular around here, there are some schools, and if there's any kind of network, that we could plug into to maybe, have some structure in place, but at the same time, if there isn't one, if we could, figure out, just explore how to do this, and then like partner up with other churches in the area and make it a San Antonio-wide thing.
The PTA may need something else to contact, because help out with that. They do a lot for it, try to do a lot for it.
I think we're cool.
Let me take one more comment from Mary.
Oh, it's in your son.
You said it's time to, I was going to say.
Now, there's in Northside where I used to be a teacher, trainer, but, they have communities in schools, CIS, communities in schools. Some, they're not all over, but they're at campuses, and they provide school supplies and, clothing, and, Parker Branch Dorley was one of the community school liaisons, so.
Thank you. I've got the CIS term in notes, in my other notes from the previous one.
We had a social worker from CIS that just compiled our just because we had a large solicit on it.
Sure. Thank you all so much for your input. We are past time, so we'll dismiss today. And look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah.